I thought it was love, until I realized I was living with a monster. Sometimes I wonder, was there a moment when it could all have been stopped? A point where I could have turned around and walked away before it was too late. But maybe that's the eternal mistake of men. We believe that love heals, that we can save another person if we just stay close enough. I met Alice, let's call her that, 3 years ago. On that day, she seemed like the most ordinary girl. Pretty, lively, with a loud laugh and a strange habit of biting her nails when she was nervous. She worked as a receptionist at the fitness club I went to after work. We crossed paths a few times at the front desk, exchanged a few words, and gradually it turned into a habit. She knew how to listen. Or maybe she just pretended to. At the time, I had just come out of a long relationship where I was constantly accused of being cold, so being with her made me feel understood. After a couple of weeks of small talk, she suggested we meet outside the gym. We went out for coffee. Conversation flowed so easily, as if we had known each other forever. That night, I caught myself laughing in a way I hadn't in a long time. She was unusual, not like everyone else. Sometimes she would suddenly fall silent, stare into the void, then abruptly switch topics and start talking about something completely random. Or in the middle of a conversation, she'd ask things like, "Have you ever thought that maybe we're all just characters in someone's dream?" I took it as part of her charm. I thought she was just being philosophical, playing with ideas. I had no idea these were the first cracks in her mind. A month later, we were dating. At first, everything was perfect. She cooked breakfasts, left me sweet notes on sticky pads, celebrated the smallest things. It felt like I had finally found a woman who genuinely appreciated having me around. But soon the odd behavior started to show. The first thing I noticed was her obsessive need for attention. And not just mine. We'd be walking down the street, and suddenly she would act like she was deliberately trying to draw stares, laughing too loud, twirling her hair, tugging up her shirt just enough to show her stomach. I thought, fine, maybe she's just being flirty. It happens. But it went further. One time we went to my friend's place at their dacha. There were about 10 of us. I stepped into the kitchen, and when I came back, Alice was standing in the middle of the room telling everyone how she had a sexy birthmark on her back. And not just telling them, she actually lifted her shirt and showed it. Everyone exchanged looks. Some laughed awkwardly, others looked away. I pulled her aside and asked what the hell that was. She just giggled. "What? It's just my back." I chalked it up to wine. But the feeling stuck with me. With each passing month, these episodes multiplied. She'd start chatting with a cab driver and suddenly say, "Want me to show you something?" and begin unzipping her jacket a little lower than necessary. The driver would tense up, it'd step in, we'd leave, and later she'd act like nothing happened. I tried to talk to her, calmly explained that this behavior wasn't normal. She promised she'd stop, swore she was just fooling around. And again, I believed her, because despite everything, there were those other moments. The ones I clung to. Our quiet nights at home, when she fell asleep on my shoulder. Our trips out of town, where we'd sit by the fire for hours talking about the future. In those moments, I thought her oddness was just a mask, and deep inside she was fragile and tender. I fell in love, truly, and I convinced myself I could hold her back from falling into madness. A year later, I proposed. And that's when the real hell began. The wedding was small, just close family. Alice's parents looked like they couldn't care less. Her mother was cold, her father was drinking openly during the reception. At the time, I thought, well, not everyone has a picture-perfect family. But later I realized, that's where her demons were born. After the wedding, we moved into a rented apartment. For a few weeks, things were fine. But then Alice snapped. She became obsessed with attention. Any kind of attention. One day, I came home early and walked in on her sitting in the living room, streaming live on Instagram, wearing nothing but lingerie. The comments were full of men writing filthy things, and she was laughing and flirting back. I grabbed her phone, shut off the stream, and started yelling. She just looked at me calmly and said, "What? I'm not cheating on you. It's just a game." For her, it was a game. For me, it was betrayal. But I forgave her. Again. Because I loved her. Because I hoped things would change. I didn't know then that this was only the beginning. With every passing month, Alice slipped further into what I first tried to call quirks, then eccentricities, and eventually realized was an illness. After the livestream incident, I tried to set boundaries. I told her never to pull a stunt like that again, warned her that if it happened once more, I would leave. She listened, nodded, even cried, promised me she understood. A week of silence, too. I almost believed her. And then came the next episode. We were coming home one summer evening. It was hot, the bus was stuffy. Alice was in a short skirt, sitting across from some 16-year-old kid. I noticed him glancing at her, and she deliberately crossed and uncrossed her legs, wider than necessary. Then leaned forward slightly, and I realized she wasn't wearing underwear. I froze. I wanted to scream right there in the bus, but I held it in, waited until we got off, and then I exploded. "Are you out of your mind?" I shouted. "Do you understand what you just did?" She looked at me like I was insane. "You're exaggerating," she said calmly. I was just hot. That's when I understood. She either didn't see the boundaries or refused to. That night was the first time I thought living with her was dangerous. But leaving? I still couldn't. I tried talking to her parents. I called her mother, explained that something was wrong with Alice. Her mother only replied, flatly, "She's always been special. Get used to it." I pushed further, suggested Alice see a psychologist. She exploded. "You're saying I'm crazy." She screamed. "You're the one who's crazy. You're suffocating me, controlling me, and then blaming me." The breakdowns became routine. Any attempt to talk about boundaries triggered yelling, tears, threats that she would hurt herself. I lived as if on a minefield. The breaking point came at my friend's birthday. We gathered at a bar. Everything was fine until Alice had too much to drink. At some point, she just stood up, lifted her shirt, and showed everyone her chest. "Look, perfect shape." She laughed. The place froze. Some stared, others looked away. I grabbed her arm, dragged her to the bathroom, yelling until my voice cracked. She just smirked and said, "You're jealous because you've got issues." That was when I knew she was sick. Then I started noticing little things I'd missed before. She'd say she was going to the store for bread and disappear for 3 hours. When I asked, she gave vague answers. On her phone, I found chats with random men, "Want a pic?" followed by an exchange of intimate photos. When I confronted her with proof, she answered calmly, "That's not cheating. I'm not sleeping with them." For her, cheating only meant physical contact. Everything else was fun. I tried to save our marriage, begged her to get help, tried controlling her, checked her phone, put limits on social media. She always found a way around it. And then came the aggression. If before she only flirted with others, now she turned it on me. In her rage, she once threw a mug at me. Another time, she punched me in the face. At first I thought, an accident. But then I understood. This was how she asserted power. I began to fear going home. The worst night came unexpectedly. I woke up to a feeling that someone was watching me. Opened my eyes. Alice stood by the bed, holding a knife. "You'll leave me anyway," she whispered. "I see it. I know." I froze. Spoke softly, calmly. Somehow convinced her to put the knife down. By morning, she acted as if nothing had happened. That's when I knew it was over. Leaving was brutal. I packed my things in one evening. She screamed, tore at her hair, begged me to stay, then threatened to kill herself. I broke and called an ambulance. The doctors took her to the psychiatric ward. I stood outside the building with my suitcase, feeling like something inside me had shattered. The following weeks were hell. She called from unknown numbers, sent letters, showed up at my parents' place, swore she would change, said she finally understood, that things would be different. But I knew they wouldn't. I started life from scratch, rented a small apartment, found a new job. Inside, I felt empty. But day by day, it became lighter. Alice was left in the past, in a story I wouldn't wish on anyone to live through. The first months without Alice felt like withdrawal. I was so used to chaos at home, the shouting, the tears, the explosions of emotions. When I suddenly found myself alone in an empty apartment, the silence was suffocating at first. I kept catching myself waiting, as if at any moment, someone would burst in, start screaming, blaming, crying. But no one came. I could go to bed at night and wake up in the morning without fear of having to justify why I went to sleep too late. I could leave a cup on the table and not face a meltdown over the mess. I could chat with a female colleague without being accused of cheating. Silence slowly became my medicine. But Alice didn't give up. First, it was calls. I changed numbers, blocked her, but she always found new ways. Then came letters. Thick envelopes with words scribbled across them. Please open. One of them contained the key to our old apartment and a note. I'm always waiting for you at home. Another had a photo of the two of us, cut in half and taped back together. That was frightening. I took the letters to the police, but they just shrugged. There's no direct threat. We can't do anything. I threw myself into work, took on extra projects, stayed late at the office. I didn't work for money. I worked to keep my mind occupied. My colleagues noticed the change. It became more focused, more firm. Where once I agreed to everything just to avoid conflict, I now had the strength to say a clear no. At the gym, I poured out all the anger and pain. Ran until I collapsed, lifted weights I'd never dared touch before. My body was changing along with my mind. But the most important part was learning to trust people again. After Alice, I had a few attempts at dating. But each time, I ruined it. If I saw a message on a woman's phone from another man, I panicked. Inside, a voice whispered, "She'll betray you too." That's when I realized I wasn't ready. So I chose another path, surrounding myself with friends. I reconnected with the guys I drifted from. We drove around, went out into nature, hung out at bars. Simple male companionship became therapy. Meanwhile, Alice sank deeper into madness. One day, my mother called me. "Son, Alice came here." She stood at the door, crying, saying you had to forgive her. I sighed and asked my parents not to let her in anymore. A week later, I found out she had messaged my new boss on social media. Tried to convince her that I was dangerous, that I was mentally unstable. Fortunately, my boss was a wise woman. She showed me the messages and said, clearly, you hurt someone badly in the past. But that's your private life. At work, you're a professional. I felt lighter. Her manipulations no longer destroyed my world. The turning point came one evening when I sat in my apartment and, for the first time in a long while, felt happy. I was simply drinking tea, reading a book, listening to music. No one interrupted, no one screamed, no one demanded attention. And I realized I was content being alone. It was a revelation. All my life, I believed happiness was only possible in a couple, that being alone meant being unwanted. But in solitude, I discovered peace and freedom for the first time. 6 months passed. I met a woman, Yana. She was the complete opposite of Alice, calm, balanced, with a gentle smile and clear eyes. We met at English classes. At first, we only talked during breaks, then shared coffee, then started going for walks. I was afraid, always waiting for the same red flags I'd seen with Alice. But they never came. Anna respected boundaries. She never checked where I was or who I was with, never staged scenes. Her calm was so unusual to me that at first, I almost missed the storms. But then I understood. Storms aren't love. Alice, however, kept pursuing me. She found out about Anna, discovered her page, and began writing. At first, he lied to me. Then, he still loves me. When Anna showed me these messages, I expected her to be frightened. But Anna just smiled. You know, I work at a school. Every year I deal with mothers like this, unstable. I know how to handle them. And she simply blocked her. For the first time, I saw how normal people resolve conflicts. They set boundaries and don't waste energy on madness. The year after the divorce was the most transformative of my life. I switched jobs to a higher-paying one, moved out of my tiny place, and rented a spacious apartment. With Anna, things grew naturally, without drama. I was learning what it meant to be happy in a healthy relationship. As for Alice, she faded further into her own world. Sometimes I heard from acquaintances that she was hanging around questionable people. Some said she had joined a cult. Others, that she had been admitted to a psychiatric clinic again. I stopped caring. It was no longer my problem. The greatest lesson I learned that year: you cannot save someone who doesn't want to be saved. I tried to hold on to Alice, to help her, to pull her out. But in the end, I would have drowned with her if I hadn't escaped. Sometimes love isn't sacrifice, It's the strength to walk away. One day, about a year and a half after our breakup, I received her last letter. There were no threats, no pleas. Just a single line. You were right. I destroyed everything myself. I didn't reply. I just put the letter in a drawer, closed it, and went on living. Now, when I tell this story to friends or acquaintances, many don't believe it. They say, no woman would behave like that. But I know the truth. Yes, they can. And sometimes we trap ourselves by excusing madness with the word love. Today, I live peacefully. I have work, goals, and a woman I feel good with. And Alice, she remains in the past, in the dark chapter of my life that'll never reopen. I often wonder, what if I had stayed? If I had kept enduring, justifying, closing my eyes to everything Alice did? And I see myself as an old, broken man, terrified of his own home. A man who gave up his identity to please someone else's whims. A man who would never know what freedom and respect truly are. And then I thank God, fate, or something higher, for the day I found the strength to walk away. When I was with Alice, I believed love was sacrifice. That if you loved someone, you had to endure, forgive, and carry all the weight on your shoulders. Now I know, that's not love. Love is when two people support each other. When being with someone makes you stronger, not weaker. When you know you can trust them, when your boundaries are respected. Alice didn't love me. She loved attention, power, drama. I was just a prop in her play. Alice kept convincing me I was not good enough, that I wasn't measuring up, that I was to blame for her breakdowns. But when I left, I saw the truth. I wasn't weak. On the contrary, I was strong, because I endured all that hell and still managed to escape. I learned to say no. I learned to protect my boundaries. I learned to be alone and still feel whole. Now I know, no one has the right to make me less than I am. The first months after leaving were terrifying. The loneliness pressed down on me. I was afraid it'd break and go back. But it was in solitude that I finally found myself. I started doing the things I had always postponed: sports, books, learning new skills. I discovered I could enjoy simple things: a cup of coffee, silence, a walk. And when I met Anna, I was already a different man, not dependent, not desperate for a savior. I was whole. And because of that, I was able to build a healthy relationship. You know, I don't hate Alice. Yes, she broke my life for a while. Yes, she tried to destroy me. But if not for her, I would never have walked this path and become who I am. Alice was my hardest but most valuable lesson. I learned you cannot save someone who doesn't want to be saved. You cannot carry someone else's madness on your shoulders. And most importantly, you cannot betray yourself for the illusion of love. If you're reading this and recognize yourself, if you're living with someone who manipulates you, breaks your mind, makes you feel guilty for their mistakes, remember, this is not love. Love should not destroy you. Love should not make you suffer just so someone else can feel comfortable. You don't have to endure. You don't have to save them. You have the right to leave. It's been several years since I left Alice. I have a job I'm proud of. I have friends I'm no longer afraid to lose. I have a woman with whom I build a relationship based on trust, not fear. Sometimes the past comes back, in dreams, in memories. Sometimes I still flinch when I hear raised voices. But now I know how to stop the triggers. I know it's just memory. Most importantly, I no longer live in hell. I still keep that last letter from Alice. You were right, I destroyed everything myself. One didn't throw it away, because it reminds me how far I've come. It reminds me I will never again let anyone break me. Every time I doubt myself, I take it out and think, I survived, and am no longer a victim. This story isn't about Alice. It's about me. About how I once fell into the trap of someone else's madness. About how I almost lost myself. About how I found the strength to leave. And if even one person reads this and realizes they too can walk away, that they too can build a new life, then sharing my confession wasn't in vain. Because the most important thing about any pain is this: it's not the end. It's the beginning. The end of one life and the start of another. And if you asked me, do I regret any of it? No, because it shaped me into who I am today. And if I had the choice to live a life without Alice, but also without these lessons, or to walk through hell and come out stronger, I would choose hell. Because I came out alive.